Why standing still is physically impossible. At first, this sounds obvious. Of course, you can stand still. You're probably doing it right now. Or sitting, or lying down. The room feels quiet. Nothing dramatic is happening. No rushing, no falling, no spinning. Your body feels at rest. And that idea feels so natural that we almost never question it. Standing still feels like the default. Motion feels like the exception. If something moves, something must have pushed it. If nothing is pushing, it should stop. That's how the world feels when you're human-sized, living inside rooms, surrounded by air and floors and friction and gravity, doing their invisible housekeeping. So standing still feels real, solid, undeniable. But then something feels off. Not loudly off. Not enough to ring alarm bells. Just a tiny uneasiness, like realizing the room isn't quite as silent as you thought. Let's slow down for a second. Imagine you're standing alone in a quiet room at night. Lights dim. No music. No phone buzzing. Just you and the room and the air. You're standing still. At least that's what it feels like. But what does still actually mean? Does it mean your feet aren't sliding across the floor? Yes. Does it mean your arms aren't swinging? Sure. Does it mean your body isn't changing position relative to the walls? Okay, that seems fair. But notice what we just did. Quietly, without noticing. We defined still by comparing ourselves to something else. The floor, the walls, the room. Stillness, it turns out, is already a comparison. And comparisons are where physics starts to get uncomfortable. Because now we have to ask, still relative to what? Let's stay in the room. You're standing there, breathing softly. Your chest rises. Your chest falls. Even if you try to freeze completely. Your lungs don't listen. They keep pulling air in, pushing air out. Your heart keeps tightening and releasing over and over, quietly thudding in your chest. Blood slides through vessels like a slow river. Cells rearrange themselves. Proteins fold and unfold. Molecules vibrate, jittering with tiny, relentless motion. Already standing still is starting to look less still. But you might say, and this is reasonable. That's not what I mean. I mean overall, I'm not going anywhere. Okay, fair enough. Let's zoom out. You're standing on the floor. The floor is part of a building. The building is attached to the earth. The earth feels solid, immovable. Like the ultimate definition of at rest. But the earth is turning. Slowly, smoothly, without asking for your opinion. At the equator, the ground moves at about 1,000 miles an hour. You don't feel it because everything around you is moving too. The air, the oceans, the buildings, your body, all sharing the motion. So relative to the earth, you're still. but relative to space. You are sweeping through the darkness at astonishing speed right now while feeling perfectly calm. And the Earth isn't just spinning. It's circling the sun. The sun isn't parked either. It's drifting through the galaxy. The galaxy itself is sliding, stretching, carried along by a universe that refuses to stay put. So if you ask, am I standing still in the universe? The universe gently answers, no, not even close. But maybe that still feels like a trick. After all, motion is relative, right? You could say, fine, then I'm still relative to myself. That feels clever and comforting. Let's try that. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine freezing your body perfectly. No breathing, no heartbeat, no shifting weight. A statue. Now imagine zooming in. Past skin, past cells, down into atoms. Atoms don't sit quietly. Electrons don't orbit politely like tiny planets. They buzz. They smear. They behave more like restless clouds than solid points. Even when an object is as cold as physics allows, there is still motion left over, not because something is pushing, but because stillness simply isn't an option. This is where it gets uncomfortable. The universe doesn't allow perfect rest, not as a technical limitation, not because we lack better instruments, but because the rules themselves don't include it. Physicists didn't expect this at first. They imagined a universe where you could, at least in principle, stop everything. Zero motion. Absolute calm. But every time they tried to define it, it slipped away. If you pin down position perfectly, motion becomes uncertain. If you freeze motion, position becomes fuzzy. Nature refuses to let both be nailed down at the same time. It's as if the universe is whispering. You can pause the music, but the room will still hum. Let's return to the quiet room. You're standing there again. Nothing dramatic. No cosmic explosions. No spinning galaxies in sight. Just silence. But now that silence feels different. The air is restless, molecules bumping into one another in chaotic little dances. The floor beneath your feet is made of atoms that never quite touch, held apart by invisible forces vibrating in place. Even solid is a kind of motion pretending to be stable. Standing still, it turns out, doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening in a way that balances out, just enough to look calm from far away. And that balance is fragile. If one tiny thing were truly, perfectly still, no vibration, no uncertainty, no motion of any kind, the universe wouldn't know what to do with it. It would break the rules simply by existing. So when you stand still, you're actually participating in a vast choreography of motion that cancels itself out just enough to feel like rest. A miracle of moving parts agreeing, temporarily, to look quiet. And maybe that's why true stillness feels so comforting. Because it doesn't really exist. It's an illusion the universe offers us. So we can pause and breathe and forget for a moment that everything, absolutely everything, is quietly, stubbornly, endlessly in motion. A moving. Let's slow down again. Because there's another way this becomes strange. When we talk about motion, we usually imagine something changing position. A hand moving across a table. A chair being dragged across the floor. Motion feels like displacement. Like leaving one place and arriving at another. So if nothing is changing place, we feel justified calling it still. But place itself is a slippery thing. Imagine the room again. Same room, same walls. Now imagine removing the walls. Just empty space. No marks. No grid. No up or downs. Just darkness and distance. In that emptiness, what does it even mean to say something is standing still? Still relative to what? There's no cosmic flaw. No universal wall to lean against. If an object drifts through that emptiness at a constant speed, with no reference points, there is no experiment it can perform to discover its own motion. From its point of view, it may as well be perfectly at rest. This bothered physicists deeply, because it suggests something unsettling. Motion is not something you have. It's something you share. And without something else to compare yourself to, motion dissolves into meaninglessness. So standing still isn't a property of an object. It's a relationship. And relationships can change depending on who's looking. You standing on the floor feels still. An observer floating in space, watching the earth spin, sees you racing past. An atom inside your body sees chaos. An electron doesn't even see you at all, just probability and fields. All of them are right. None of them get the final word. This is where the idea of stillness quietly collapses. Not with drama, not with a loud contradiction, just with a soft realization that the word still doesn't point to anything absolute. It points to convenience, to comfort, to the scale at which humans live. And maybe that's okay, because the universe isn't obligated to line up with our intuition. It only needs to be consistent with itself. Let's sit with the room one more time. You're there, breathing, listening. The room feels calm again, not because motion has stopped, but because your senses have learned what to ignore. They average things out. They smooth the noise. They tell you a useful story. You are at rest. And it's a good story. A necessary one. Without it, you'd feel constantly dizzy, aware of spinning planets and vibrating atoms and expanding space. You couldn't function. So the universe gives you a filtered version of reality, one where standing still feels real enough to trust. But underneath that story, quietly, patiently, Everything keeps moving, not rushing, not striving, just existing in a state where complete rest never quite arrives. And if you stay with that thought long enough, not trying to solve it, not trying to pin it down, just letting it sit beside you in the quiet room, you might start to notice that the idea of standing still was never really about physics at all. It was about how much motion we are willing to notice.